Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Natsu Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about This Monster Wants to Eat Me, Season 1, Episode 6. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up immediately where the last episode left off, and we get the revelation that the thing that Miko did is she bit off 2 of her tails. So now she's down to 4. So I kind of figured as much. I think I even last episode made the parallel to what Hikaru did in the summer Hikaru died. I figured she would do something similar to limit herself and taking away some of her own yokai energy. And she even brought up something I thought was really interesting, because she's like, up until this point in time, I'd basically been holding on to my pride and status as a yokai, because like all her tails were her tails and the amount of power she has accumulated over the years. It's just her status showing how powerful and how big dog she is amongst the other yokai. But obviously it's like, none of that matters now that you are like the most important. You are my number one priority, Hinako. So like, no matter what I have to sacrifice, if it means protecting you in the long run, I will weaken myself if it means like protecting you from not only me, but also putting you in a more favorable position all around. So I think it's so interesting that she's also making a point to Shiori, saying like, you could not even understand, like in 1,000 years you could never understand that. Maybe we'll find out later on that Shiori might be a lot more understanding than even Miko gives her credit for. But yes, she has her reasons for doing the whole Hinako thing, but there has to be other driving forces and motivation to go as far as she does, that I think she's a lot more sentimental. Like, she plays, I don't know if aloof is the right word, but she is very playful, but I think that is kind of like a mask to hide maybe like some deep-seated like sentimentality she has that she sees in Hinako that maybe was connected to someone that was in the past, because she talks about the different types of yokai having different types of people, So it's like, well, what's Shiori's type? And you would assume it's Hinako. Hinako's probably not the first Hinako she's ever dealt with, but that might be connected to some past stuff that she's kind of imprinting upon Hinako, why she's going so far above and beyond, like would any yokai really bother going? She's like using this as like this predication of like, oh, I'm doing it for food purposes, I want you to be your most delicious, yada yada yada. But it's like, there's probably a hint of truth there, but there's probably so much she's it's a liable mission where it's like, I'm telling you certain truths, but I'm not telling you the entire truth. I'm omitting certain things that are contextually important to my motivation on why I'm doing what I'm doing. But either way, my point for that whole diatribe was like, I think she understands Miko a lot more than Miko kind of believes her to be. But it's like, right, like to go as far as she can for Hinako, because she's watched over Hinako for so much of her life, and it's like, I will do whatever is necessary to like make sure I'm never as much of a threat to you as I could be. Like, she still can potentially fall into that slump of, oh, I'm thirsting after and like craving after you again, but I've at least mitigated it. I've at least lessened the chances of that happening in the future. They're not zero, but they are less than they were previously. And jumping ahead, just in contextually for this series, I can definitely see, like, especially because they make such a point to lean into how many tails she has, I feel like probably as the story goes on, she's going to lose more tails. Now, whether that's going to be voluntarily, where she starts losing herself more and more and can't be around Hinako unless she sacrifices more tails, or whether future yokai she end up fighting end up cutting off her tails. I don't know what it means, like what it would mean like if she as a fox yokai lost all of her tails. I don't know if she would die necessarily, but she would definitely be in a much, much weaker state. And as we kind of explore in this episode, and it's something I kind of thought was the case when Miko had said to Shiori, you're going to have to bet your power, you're going to have to protect Hinako and be her bodyguard in places my power can't reach or something. And I was like, interesting. I was like, does having less tails shorten your reach? And even Shiori knows that basically, especially because they had cut back to like her little shrine, the little shrine that they pray to for her. I was like, right. So like an example I think of is like the most recent with like Dun Dun Dun. I don't know if this changes where the manga currently is, but currently where the anime is at the very least, Seiko's powers are only allocated because she borrows her powers from like a god of the territory that she lives in, and when she's outside of that territory, she doesn't have any powers. She's capable enough on her own, but she's limited without her powers and stuff. So I was wondering, like, oh, it's Miko's thing similar to that. I guess you could also draw the parallel to like the location bound spirit in earlier Donda Don that's connected to Turbo Granny. I mean, I guess that kind of falls under all like spirits because, I mean, not all spirits, but typically spirits are associated with locations and they typically can't go too far out of that bound. But Miko could when she was at full power, all the power she amassed. But the more tails she loses, the less and less her reach can go outside of like certain ranges of her territory. So that's why she's leaning into Shiori. It's like it's this double-edged sword of, yes, I made it so I can stay by Hinako's side, but at the same time, staying by Hinako's side in this one way has hampered and heavily reduced my ability to be by Hinako's side in other elements and in other ways. So I just think that's kind of an interesting, complicated trade-off that she obviously has not brought up to Hinako. Shiori knows, and she probably figures Shiori knows, but like Hinako is unaware, and she doesn't want Hinako to be too worried about like what that could mean in the long run. Once again, if she's ever in a situation where she has to like lose more tails, like I said, whether it's voluntarily or like just because someone else cuts them off. And despite everything being this so-called lie, it doesn't change the fact is that regardless of it all, like some of the memories, some of all this and that might have been a lie, but knowing like you still watched over me so much of my life, you have protected me, you've cared for me, and even then like you've still implemented yourself directly in my life as my bestest best friend, and nothing is ever going to change that. And obviously Miko turns into like a blubbering mess, being like, I love you, I'm going to be BFFs forever, nothing's ever going to change that, we're back to being friends again. So they end up dropping Hinako back at her house, and Shiori came to be like, oh, just, making sure because there's still the danger of you potentially turning on Hinako in the future, which even Miko acknowledges that. And so they end up having to talk about a very interesting, and I think it's going to be a pivotal story beat, and that being something that Miko reveals that Hinako had only started getting attacked by yokai after the accident, because Shiori had kind of wondered like, well, it could easily been like her family could have been killed by yokai, and it's like, yeah, there's a very strong possibility because of that. And it's a situation of yokai do attack regular people as well, but Hinako being as delectable to yokai would make them more likely to go in a frenzy and attack her and her entire family, which would kind of speak volumes and make it interesting that like her family would be dead and she's the only one that miraculously survived. I think that's going to be something we kind of explore. But Miko reveals that because of the accident, it's what after that, it's like after she got out of the hospital is when the rate of like yokai around her started increasing like crazy. So it makes you wonder what happened in that time frame, like post the accident, that really escalated all this. And she's even said like over the years that smell that has attracted so many yokai has gotten more and more apparent and has grown more and more as the years has passed. So I'm wondering, like, was something implanted in her? Like, did something affect her or touch her all those years ago, It seems to all be relative to that scar that's on the right side of her body. It seems like that might be the only scarring she got post the accident. So it might be something like implanted itself in her in that moment to make her as electable as, like, I don't know if it's like another yokai or something, like, because I was thinking initially like maybe it's her like need and want for death that kind of drew them in, which there's been references to that, but it seems like it's specifically about that scarring, and it's just like I don't know if like something marked her for whatever reason, like who knows. And I think that's going to be a big mystery we probably unveil as the series progresses. Something that still I feel like I'm misunderstanding it, and that's the whole Miko and Hinako thing, because yes, Hinako memories of having like she had talked about Miko's been her best friend her entire life, that even pre-accident Miko was a part of her life, which we know was complete and utter bullshit. I mean, technically, like, she was watching over them, but not to the extent of like, oh, I'm actually like in your life like I am now. But because my misunderstanding was like, okay, so everything about your life was BS, like with Miko, like Miko being there with you all the way through. But then we see at one point, like, her first time protecting Hinako from a yokai, and then like she was in like her little girl form and said, oh, Miko. And we saw last episode about like, right, her aunt had answered the door and Miko came running in. That's what I was kind of confused by. That's what still was, I was like, wait, was my understanding of that wrong? I think probably only fairly recently has Miko, and this was kind of still my understanding, was like only fairly recently has Miko like directly gotten involved in Hinako's life, because it's like, I need to be closer to your side, and just kind of like protecting you from where I was isn't like something I can do. So I don't know if it's a thing of she basically popped in and out. Like, it's like, hey, here I am, like while you're younger, I popped in here, kept my distance, but like every time, because the attacks on her from yokai became more and more prevalent, that's why she decided to kind of but like I said, my misunderstanding was just because like she was in her little girl form, like around the same age Hinako was at the time, that like, oh, so it's like, did you just pop in and out until like fairly recently, where you started staying consistently in her life? Is that what that is? So you warped her memories to be like, okay, I'm like, whenever, so you think I've always been a part of your life, you won't think it's so strange like when I just pop up out of nowhere. It's like, oh, who's this strange girl? And it doesn't, you won't ask any questions. So maybe that's designed, like I said, this could be like my misinterpreting and misunderstanding of like how that whole thing works. So that was something I'm kind of getting a little hung up on. Either way, Shiori and Miko come to this mutual understanding of like, Miko's like, I will use you, and then even Shiori's like, I will use you as well, all for the purposes of protecting Hinako. It's like all the way up until the point that you turn your fangs, specifically Shiori, turn her fangs against Hinako, and as I will use you and your power as much as possible, because like obviously on some level you do want to protect Hinako. Yes, it's for selfish reasons. Once again, I do believe there's even deeper layers to it, but it's like you have your reasons for it, but I will still use it because you're a necessary evil in the grand scheme of things. So you're essentially the lesser of evils when compared to every other yokai that has no sentimentality connection to Hinako. So that's kind of where they stand, and I like that, just that red aura popping around Hinako, and I think that's such a neat little. I was about to say narrative device, but just like visual representation of like that yokai coming out of because like we see it with Shiori, like her left eye. I think it's her left eye, right? That glows like that yellowish amber. And then Miko's eye is the same way, where it turns like black, dark black. And then she has like the red pupil. So I think that's interesting that it manifests itself that way. Because that might be the only way. Because at least with Shiori, her skin like scales up and her arm turns into a claw. That's like probably as far as she can go while still maintaining her human form without going full like in the water to turn into a mermaid. But I'm curious, does like is that eye thing the only thing Miko does with her transformation, or like could she like gain some of her like her teeth, like her fangs, while in human form or not? That's stuff I'm curious about as well. But either way, the next day at school, it's supposed to be a big celebration, because Shiori's like, hey, we should stay friends, we're all, you're a friend of Hinako, so you're a friend of mine. She got to make that declaration a couple episodes ago, but Miko's like, nah, fuck that, I didn't, get away, no. But then like she still like implements herself into their moment, where it's like, hey, this is supposed to be me bringing you a whole bunch of snacks to kind of like, kind of renew our friendship and everything. And obviously Hinako's very happy that Miko is getting close to Shiori, even though they butt heads a lot. They are united on the front that they both adore and care for Hinako. And obviously Miko gets dragged away because of other responsibilities she has. And then it kind of gets Hinako happy because she's... Hopefully I said Miko just then and not just Hinako. I hope I didn't double say Hinako. Well, if I did, I'm correcting myself now. Miko got dragged away, and Hinako kind of talks about being happy how close her and Shiori are, because it's like, oh, like, I'm surprised you're able to stay friends with her being a yokai. And it's like, I'm actually glad that she's a yokai. And I thought that was such an interesting conversation and perspective from Miko. It isn't just on... It's tied to the death front, but not from the front of, oh, like, Miko would eat me and kill me like I'd want her to. I think twofold. One, she sees how much... and learn how much Miko struggled with that. So she would never want to put Miko through that, because it's like Miko would never do it. And two, she knows that if she ever did, Miko would probably like hate herself. And it's like, I never want you to be in that position. But from her perspective, she says like, Miko has always been a son for so many other people, herself included. It's like, but it's like so many people rely on her and turn to her. She's helping so many people. That's just kind of been in her nature ever since she was kind of captured by that monk all those years ago. And she just naturally has just become that person who acts as a guardian for this place and just wants to help people and look after them. But it really stems from her being like, her biggest concern was if she let Shiori kill her, or if she ever died, or just let death take her, it's like, my best friend would be heartbroken. I think it's interesting that she's not really thinking about her aunt in that capacity, which I think is interesting. But knowing that Miko is a yokai, it's a little easier. She's like, well, you've lived such a long life, and my life will be a blip in your life. And she even brings up the same thing with Shiori of like, well, you know, you're going to live for a long time as a yokai, so like my lifespan's not going to mean much. But it's like, knowing that like Miko would be so heartbroken if anything happened to her, especially knowing like how tied to her Miko is, that she feels this need to be very protective of you because she blames herself for not protecting your family. So she is like heavily tied to you. So if anything did happen to you, like she would be devastated. But it's like, right, she'll move on, she'll have other responsibilities, but also she won't be lonely because she won't be alone, because at the very least, you know, maybe other people around her will eventually die, but she will have, like, as long as you guys maintain your friendship, she will have another yokai that's a friend, and you guys will have each other, so she won't be alone. So that's kind of good. But then Shiori, like, thinks to herself, like, you know, humans are so incomprehensible, because she's like, do you really think yokai don't get lonely? Which are like, and that's where I'm, like, touching on, like, the sentimentality that she has towards, that Shiori has towards Hinako, that there's something there. I mean, there's also the twofold of like, regardless of what you think, you will mean something to Miko, that she won't just like forget you. Like nothing else will ever fill that void inside of her. No one else. It was still, and that kind of thing that Shiori's probably been through that, where it's like people she adored and cared about, whether like they just died of natural age, and like, you know, humans' lifespan is like a blip, that they died and stuff like that, or she killed them, or, you know, whether it's, you know, just people she cared about, whether they were lovers type of situations. You know, there's a lot, I'm sure, tragically with the whole yokai and living as long as they do type of thing. But also that being Hinako's perspective of feeling, you know, hoping that yokai don't end up being lonely, that you want us to stay friends so that when you do die, when I do eat you, that Miko won't be alone. But it's also like, yeah, that's also going to be a big rub of it all, of like, Miko will never forgive Shiori for being the person that kills you. You know, that will never, you know, so... So that's why I think she's more so leaning into the whole like, oh, you won't. And maybe in her mind, it's like, well, if you're close enough, and knowing that it was my wish, that, you know, maybe you'll be a little more forgiving for Shiori. You butt heads right now, you get mad at each other. Maybe eventually you forgive her, because you both have this thing, that thing being Hinako, that tied them together. It still ties them together post her death. So that's my thought about it. But it's also like, maybe just the whole being there to help other people, you know, will be the thing that kind of keeps her going. But also like Hinako's death could also, it's something Hinako I don't think thinks about, is it could be the thing that breaks her and makes her want to give up on helping other people. Maybe not, I don't know. It's probably the thing of, you know, you have to do what I would want. Like, I wouldn't want you giving up. I'd want you to stay the same Miko and be that for other people. You know, what you did for me, what you were for me, I want you to be that for other people. So, like, you know, I would be upset with you if you just gave up. So that would probably be enough to motivate Miko to continue on. But, you know, she still would be heartbroken over losing Hinako. Then we have Shiori pushing for Hinako to go to the beach with her, which I'm sure, like, my initial thought was like, you have to have other motivation beyond like what could be obviously like a, hey, I want you, well, for one, to have fun and cut loose a little bit, but two, like the whole trying to get you to face your trauma. It's like knowing how your family died, like this could be the means of helping you move forward. And, you know, it, one and two of I want you to be happy, and help being happy would go to a fun place like the beach. Two would also help you face your fear. So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch of like putting you in a better mindset and, you know, perspective on things. But obviously, you know, there's a lot of trauma and pain and fear associated with the water, specifically the beach and stuff. But it was actually Miko co-signing the whole thing of like, yeah, you go. You know, that way, you know, Shiori could be there. That whole conversation about her turning into what she really looks like. I don't get it twisted. The very fantasized, beautiful notion that the Western countries give, you know, what mermaids look like, you know, very beautiful fish people versus like the very like grotesque thing, but, you know, form like, you know, here in the Eastern countries, you know, that would kind of get that perspective on them. And because even Hinako thinking like, right, I only got a glimpse of Shiori. Like, I didn't even get a really good look of her, like her true form. It's like, I'm curious what she really does look like in her true form. So, and obviously even we've only seen like her silhouette in the water in the intro. That's all we've seen. So, which I'm wondering, is that Miko speaking from experience? Like, has she had run-ins with other mermaids or not? Or is that just her, like, throwing shade Shiori's way just to throw shade, you know? But either way, Miko gave her, like, the cosign because it's like, right, you should go. Like, you don't have to even just go to the water. You don't have to just swim. The fact of the matter is there's so many other things you could do in the area that's so much fun. So go ahead, you know? I also love that line from Shiori when they get there, and obviously, like, Hinako seeing all those people being so close to water, their families and stuff, and it makes her shake, grabbing that scarred side of her body. And then Shiori putting the straw hat on her, saying, like, right, you basically, humans have to protect themselves from the sun, and she's just kind of like, right, you basically have to give your eyes time to adjust to the brightness. And she's like, so until you're able to kind of walk and enjoy the beach on your own, I will basically serve as your shade. I was like, oh, I thought that was a beautiful like metaphor and yeah, I think the word I was looking for was antidote. To kind of use as a parallel for that, and I think obviously you could read deeper into it too. Her being a mermaid, going beneath the water, kind of also, you know, the water kind of acting as a little bit of shade too. So I'm like, I think there's layers to that, but it did help, and from what we can see, they did hang out, they did have fun, and obviously Hinako's kind of upset, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, like, you couldn't enjoy the water, but for, you know, Shiori, it's like, no, that's perfectly fine. I also love the whole ice cream thing, because she's like, yeah, I found, like, you know, other ways of, you know, feeling myself, and she's like, yeah, I bet you have, because initially she brings, like, after they ate and stuff, it's like, oh, do you want an ice cream? It's like, oh, you're still hungry? She's like, no, I'm good. It's like, well, I'll eat both of them. It's like, wow, you eat a lot. So I'm wondering, like, because I had brought it up previously, I was like, what does Miko eat? She kind of aside, like, was kind of like, well, if I get too hungry, I can eat something fish related, that being Shiori, which I love the whole back and forth of like, oh, you're lucky I didn't kill you. He's like, no, you're lucky I didn't kill you. You know, I'm sparing you for today. Which is like, no, I'm sparing you. So it's like that very competitive nature they both have. I forgot to talk about that earlier. So, but I'm like, yeah, what does Shiori eat to kind of satiate her appetite that she isn't driven completely insane, like being around, that she doesn't seem to have to take breaks from being around Hinako the way Miko does. But all in all, like I said, it was just kind of like this fun, nice experience, but then like things start getting cloudy in the distance. And it's like, oh, that kind of came out of nowhere. And Shiori talks about their luck. And, it's just kind of like, right, like, that peacefulness had to be disrupted. And we see like her kind of going in her yokai form a little bit with her eyes. And we see like from the water, it's like yokai or yokais are there, where it's like we see a whole bunch of like hands reaching up from the water. So that's interesting to know, like whatever this is coming brought a storm along with it. So that's gonna be interesting to find out what that is. And I think we kind of got hints to it in the intro. I think this yokai in particular was kind of hinted at. So I'm curious to see what that ends up being. This could definitely turn into a situation where whatever's coming up might be the thing that forces Shiori to have to transform into her true form. Maybe, maybe not. Something I also want to bring up, kind of a last minute thing. I should have brought up earlier, but I didn't, and I was thinking about it. I just remembered. It kind of maybe answers it might be tied to a question I had previously of how is it that even though like normal humans aren't supposed to see yokai related stuff like yokai blood and stuff like that, why is it that Hinako can? So the fact is that so many yokai have started trailing after her post the accident. I'm wondering if that's the case as well. Like, maybe she wasn't cognizant at the time because maybe, because, and even, I touched on it that Miko had said, like, the smell has gotten stronger and stronger over the years. So, like, her ties to, like, that yokai supernatural stuff has become more apparent. So, like, for her to be able to see, like, yokai blood and stuff like that, realize it. Like, I guess if you are being directly affected by it, maybe it pops up. So, like, if it landed on any other normal human being, they'd be able to see it. But it just being on Hinako, no normal human being will be able to see it. Maybe that's all there is to it. But it's such a specific thing that I'm still hung up on. That I'm like, it feels like she's almost become spiritually in tune post the accident. And that's why I was like, maybe whatever she interacted with, whatever that scar is, has kind of left like a supernatural fingerprint on her that's kind of tackled her into the more yokai supernatural world, and that's kind of allowing her to see more than she would ever be able to. I mean, she still like is adherent to like not being able to see through Shiori or even Miko's disguise. She's able to see regular yokai, which I'm sure maybe regular humans would be able to see yokai as well if they present themselves fully. But like, I don't know if it's a thing of like, are yokai, completely invisible to normal humans? Could they make themselves appear to humans? They haven't really gone over that, and I don't know if that's something they're going to deeply explore, because it's just like every time there's a yokai situation, it's always away from like public eyes. It's in the vicinity, but there's never anyone in the general public that's nearby, just like the showdown between Shiori and Miko last episode. So that makes me wonder, like, is it just applicable to yokai blood, or is it just yokais in general? And like I said, can they change whether or not humans can see them on a regular basis type of thing, or is it more of a spiritual awareness thing? That's a major question I have. And like I said, whatever that constitution may be, I'd assume that is going to be specifically tied to whatever happened to Hinako. I mean, let's not also forget she did hear that voice telling her to live as well. So it might be like some yokai saved her back in the day. I thought like, oh, maybe there's some correlation between Shiori, like her finding Hinako, because she's probably been smelling her blood and smelling her and just finally was able to track her down. But I was wondering, like, I thought maybe back in the day she had some connection, like maybe she was there the day of the accident or whatever, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. But maybe a different yokai was, and it did something. Maybe Hinako was on the verge of death, or maybe she did die, but basically she's essentially a walking corpse now. Like, maybe that's also a part to play in this, but you'd assume that would kind of deter a yokai. So that's why, like, her constitution, there's something there that I'm curious to see that mystery kind of get unraveled. But I've ran my mouth off long enough. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.